Welcome to Second Take, the show that takes a look at the issues behind the news. Eskom has invited large electricity users to bid for 291 megawatts of solar electricity that it is preparing to build and trade. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss the development, which comes despite the utility arguing that private traders should not be licensed until trading rules are finalized. Hi, Terence.
Hi, Chanel.
What is the background to this development?
Well, the big picture background is that Eskom sort of has been excluded from the renewable energy space since it started to evolve in around 2011. And that was done specifically because it is such a dominant entity. It's a vertically integrated monopoly. And also we wanted to bring in independent power producers. But Eskom over the last few years has been making clear that it wants to enter the renewable space. It's looking to set up a standalone Eskom green business, and it's in the process of doing that. And it also has a pipeline of projects initially around its power stations that are going to be retired in the next few years, building wind, solar, battery storage, and in some cases gas to power at those existing power stations to take advantage of the land that they have there, as well as the access to grid that is there, and also to dip into the Just Energy Transition Partnership funding that's arising to try and transition those areas of the country, specifically in Mpumalanga, to transition the workers and communities from the sort of reliance on coal to these new energy technologies. So they're looking at building a number of facilities at these old power stations, but they have bigger aspirations, sort of 32 gigawatt aspirations by 2040, that they want to do. That won't only be around their power stations, but that's the initial focus.
Where will the electricity come from?
Well, for this first 291 megawatts, there's a lot of questions around that. We must assume it will be around these repowering projects. They've got a number that are fairly well advanced that they've been looking at around the power stations that are going to be retired by 2030. They're also doing some at power stations that won't be retired, where they've got land like Letabo. But so there's been a number of tenders, and they're doing a lot of preparatory work, sort of pre-commercial development work on these projects. So we're assuming that it's going to come out of those power stations, but there are a lot of questions, why should Eskom immediately gain access to the grid capacity that's sort of becoming available as these coal units are retired? Shouldn't there be competition for that? Have they done all the preparatory work that they need to? That's fairly risky, that IPPs go through and traders will go through to get their projects to a bankable state. So there are a number of questions, but at the moment we don't know, but we assume that it's going to be some of the solar projects that are planned for in and around the Eskom power stations.
How does Eskom propose selecting buyers?
Well, that's also a very interesting approach. They put out a tender, basically. So it's a reverse tender where large power users are able to bid to Eskom. And there's going to be a weighting. So the price, Eskom obviously wants the highest price it can get. Then there'll be the term. How long will the large power user be prepared to sign up for? So those sort of two dynamics will be key in determining, who's the most attractive bids. So it's quite unorthodox, and we'll have to see how the market responds to that. Eskom claims that the tender has been shaped by its engagements with its existing customer base, and that they are sure that there will be appetite for that. But we'll have to see. There's going to be a public engagement around the tender, and we'll have to see whether people actually bid for this electricity. We know there is appetite amongst large industrial users in particular to try and decarbonize their electricity and to prove that it's decarbonized, so that they can, especially those that are export-oriented, as they face carbon border adjustment mechanisms, for instance, in the European Union, but not confined to the European Union. A number of countries are looking at that, as well as they have their own ESG commitments to decarbonize. And these sort of Scope 2 emissions from Eskom are a major risk for them, and they are trying to decarbonize, and they are therefore looking at options, and this is the latest one that's now supposedly on the table.
Questions have arisen about fair competition and whether Eskom is being cynical in light of its objections to traders.
Yeah, I mean, it comes at a time when Eskom looks like it's flexing its monopoly muscle a little bit, taken a number of traders, well, NERSA to court and traders to court to say they should never have been allowed to get their license in the absence of rules. But at the same time, Eskom is now, putting out very much a trading model and entering into competition with the traders. It's not clear whether traders can bid. Maybe they can for this Eskom electricity because they are looking at, matching supply with demand, and that supply is a difficult issue for many traders because of the grid constraints. So, on the one hand, Eskom is looking to say, you cherry picking our markets. On the other hand, they're looking like they're wanting to cherry pick or at least consolidate their own customers. So, it is a grey area, and I think, there could be a challenge to this. There is talk, there's been, that this could go to the Competition Commission or it could go legal. But I think it's part of this sort of fairly, transitioning from where we've come, this vertically integrated monopoly structure, to a competitive environment. And we, in that process, is going to have growing pains. It's got teething problems. And this is one of them that has to be sorted out. Is this fair competition? Does Eskom have an immediate right to that grid connection that grid connection capacity, or should it be competing on a level playing field against others who also want to bring in those projects? Their projects, are Eskom projects going to be as competitive as the IPPs who have been sharpening their pencils since 2011, getting their projects across the line in quite difficult circumstances often? Or is Eskom going to be able to finance these projects? They don't have a balance sheet. They trade with the backstop at the moment of the taxpayer. It's quite clear that some of the JET-P finance is only available to Eskom if it enters into those projects with private partners, which they said they are going to do. But there's a lot of murkiness around this, messiness around this, and I think this does look cynical in some ways, and I think that we'll have to see how it gets sorted out. I think a negotiation in the industry using the NERSA process that's underway at the moment around trading rules, that's probably a better way than to try go legal or to go through the competition. I think you don't know what the outcomes are going to be, and they could have unintended consequences. And it's not really, the adjudication is not done necessarily by people that really understand the electricity industry or the transition or how it should unfold. So I think it is messy. There are very serious questions being asked about this, but I don't know whether the legal route is the best way to sort that out.
Thank you. That's the Second Take Show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.